In the course materials for this course, you will find this fetch API folder. Let's open this into the text editor. And we're going to open the index.html. We're going to open this with live server. I'm going to make this smaller. So go live. And this is going to be a similar example as we did have earlier. And right here it should be JSON and JSON API. So basically we have this load data. We're going to see how you can use the fetch API to access this file, txt file. Then we have JSON. We're going to access this employees JSON. And finally we have JSON API. I'm going to show you how to access a REST API using fetch API. So this is going to be a really similar example as we have when we were working with AJAX. So then we're going to open the JS and we're going to open the app.js. First, we're going to see the example using the load data. We're going to open the button 1. So this is going to load this data.txt. So basically the fetch API is going to replace AJAX, but for me it was important that you learn also AJAX. So we're going to create a document, get element by ID. We're going to add button and we're going to attach an event listener. This is going to be a click and we're going to load a text function. So we're going to add load text. We're going to call this function like this, load text. And we're going to see the difference between AJAX and the fetch API. So right here in the body of the function, we need to add fetch. Fetch is going to be the function where you need to pass the URL. So in this case, it's going to be data.txt. Then right after this, we need to use a promise. So we're going to use .then in order to access to the data into this file. So we're going to add .then. This is going to execute a function, and this is going to contain a response. So we can basically we can console log this response and see what we have so far. So inspect this and open the console. And something really quick, let me add JS right here because I added this into a folder. So again, open the app.js. Now click here on load data, and you can see that we basically get a response. It says response, and you can see it says basic. We have some other information. You can see here we have the status, we have basic. So this is going to be basically the response. Something really important when you are working with the fetch API is how you are going to return the response. So open this proto, and here you can see we have a lot of different methods. So for example, you can return this response as JSON in case that you have JSON. But here on the bottom, you can see we have text, and this is a function. So we can console.log this and add .text and save this and click here on load data. And now you can see we have a promise pending. So always when you see something like this, promise pending, promise successful, and others, that means that you need to add another .then. So first we're going to return this because we need to access this into the next line. So we're going to return response.text, and right here I'm going to add another then like this function, and this is going to contain some data or the response. So we're going to console.log the data. So click here again, and now you can see we have data from a txt file. So when you are working with the fetch API, first you have to give a return value. Normally it's going to be text or JSON, but you can see we have something like this. Then we have a second .then, and basically this is going to be the data. Now that we have specified how we want to return this data. So we can add something here. We can add, for example, document get element by ID to print this into HTML. We're going to add result because this ID is, this div is using the ID result. So we're going to add this right here, and we're going to add inner HTML is going to be equals to data. So save this, click here on load data, and now you can see we have data from a txt file. So let's say that we misspell the URL and we add load data. You can see that we have this error, but you can also use .catch. And this is going to give you a more detailed error. So it's going to be a function, it's going to take an error, and we can console log this error. So save this, click here on load data, and you can see that we have cannot get and the name of the file. So catch is going to be running every time that a promise has failed. But the most important thing here is that when you are using the fetch API, you should always specify the return value. It's going to be text or JSON almost all the time. And then you have to give a second dot then to access the actual values. So you can see that when you are working with the fetch API, the code looks more organized. So we're going to use the fetch API for the rest of the course because this is going to be the new standard and is going to replace AJAX. So in the next video, we're going to see how we can read this JSON. It's going to be this second button that says JSON. So let's continue working in the next video. In this video, we're going to continue learning about the fetch API. We're going to run this JSON button. So right here, I'm going to create a second event listener. This is going to be button 2. It's going to have an event listener. Also, it's going to be click. In this case, it's going to be load JSON. So we're going to load this employees.json. So close this, copy this. And here on the bottom, I'm going to add load and print JSON. So we're going to call this function load JSON. And first, if you remember, we need to add fetch. In this case, I'm going to make all the steps again because this is a new topic introduced into the course. So we're going to add fetch, and you have to specify the URL right here, employees.json. So we're going to use .then. Right after we fetch, we're going to use then. And this is going to be a function. This is going to contain a response. And remember, you can specify console log the response right here. So we're going to click here on JSON, and you can see we have the response right here. Again, if you open the proto, you can see the methods that you can pass to this response. And you can see that this is employees JSON. So you can see we have a JSON function right here. The previous one, we returned the value as text because this was a text file. But in this case, this is going to be JSON. So we need to add return response.json like this. And then we're going to add then, because we need to give a second then. If you console log, and I'm going to remove this, if you console log the response, you can see that we don't have any values. And you click here on JSON, you can see we have a response. So we need to give a second dot then in this case. Then function, we need to pass some data. It's going to be the return. Now that we have this as a JSON, this is going to be added right here. So we can console log this data and see the response. So click here on JSON, and now you can see we have an array with 3 different objects. If you remember in the example using AJAX, we need to use JSON.parse. In the case of the fetch API, this is going to be right here. This is going to return this as a JSON, and is going to convert the response into JavaScript objects. So right here we have access to this data, and right here is where we are going to print this into the HTML. We're going to create a variable called HTML. We're going to use data.forEach because this is an array, so we're going to add for each. It's going to be a function. This is an array of employees, so we're going to pass this as employee. And then we're going to add HTML plus equals, so we can concatenate the previous value. And I'm going to add an li, close the li, $sign, open the curly braces. And we're going to access this employee. This is going to be the main object, but we need to access this name and the job. So we're going to add dot name. And we're going to copy this. And this is going to be dot and a job. So finally, we need to insert this into the HTML. So right after the for each, right here I'm going to insert into the HTML. So we're gonna use again document, get element by ID, and we're gonna pass the result. It's going to be inner HTML equals to the HTML that we generate from the for each. So save this, click here on JSON, and now you can see we have the different employees, the name and the job. You can add a separator here and click here on JSON, and you can see we have something like this. Click here on load data, and this is going to return the data from this file. So in my opinion, this code from the fetch API is going to look more cleaner than the old AJAX code. So finally, in the next video, we're gonna see how we can consume a REST API using fetch API, and this is going to be the tier button that we have here. Open the previous project that we developed, the name generator. You can see that it has the name AJAX. So we're gonna duplicate this, and I'm gonna rename this to name generator fetch API. So we're gonna start working with this file. This project is going to be really similar in a lot of ways. So we're gonna start working with this. So I'm gonna open this with live server, and this is going to start the server. So we need to open this app.js. You can see this part in the top, the form, these values, these URLs, everything is the same. The only part that is different between an AJAX project and a fetch API project is going to be the AJAX call. So we're gonna remove all the code from here. So then we're gonna start working with fetch API. I'm gonna create a comment here. We're gonna call this fetch API, and we're gonna fetch the URL because if you remember, we're building this checking the values from the form. So then we're gonna .then, and this is going to contain a response. So we're gonna return this response as JSON. So then we're gonna create a second then. It's going to be function, and this is going to be the names that are generated. So we're gonna console log the names and save this and open the console. We're gonna select, for example, France, male, and 5 names. So we're gonna click here on generate. You can see here we have 5 different names, all from France and all 4 males. So we're gonna remove this, and we're gonna create the HTML equals to an h2, and we're gonna generate names, and we're gonna close the h2. Then we're gonna continue adding more content into this HTML. We're gonna create an unordered list. We're gonna give the class called list. Here on the bottom, we're gonna add HTML plus equals and close the unordered list. Then these names is going to be an array, so we're gonna add names for each. It's going to be a function. Then we're gonna access each name, and it's going to be HTML equals to template or string literals, and we're gonna add li, close the li, and open the $sign. We need to access this name, so we're gonna use this name and then a dot name like this, and this is going to be good to go. So finally we're gonna insert this, and if you remember, this ID is called result, so we're gonna insert this into the result. So we're going to add document dot, we're gonna add query selector result. Inner HTML is going to be equals to this HTML. Finally, we can catch the error function error, and we can console log the error. So let's save this and let's make a test. We're gonna select United States, we're gonna select male, and we're gonna generate 5 different names. Click here on generate, and you can see it only print 1 because here I didn't concatenate from the previous line. So again, we're gonna select United States, mail, 5 different names. You can see that this is working. And you can see the code looks more cleaner using Fetch API instead of using AJAX, at least in my opinion. So this is going to be the project for this. In the next video, we're gonna introduce the arrow functions, and then we're gonna continue working with the Fetch API.